In 2003, evil visited the shores of the Grand Bahama, tear through the entire community just like a hurricane, leaving many grieving families in its wake. For these families, the actions of one man changed their lives forever. The local authorities and even international detectives were left stumped and confused as to what was going on in this community. Today, we're going to be talking about the case of the Bahama serial killer. The first boy to go missing on May 9, 2003 was Jake Grant. He told his sister he was just going out and he's going to be right back. He was 12 years old. On May 16, 2003, Mackinson Colas, at just age 11, was last seen going on an errand for his mother. On May 27, 2003, D'Angelo Mackenzie, 13 years old, was last seen heading to school from his grandmother's house near town center. Junior Remy was just 11 years old when he was reported missing on July 29, 2003 by his mother. By September 28, 2003, with the disappearance of Desmond Roll, age 14, who vanished after his packing shift at a local supermarket, the Bahamas knew something was horribly wrong. By October 7, 2003, with a joint task force between the Royal Bahamas Police Force and the South Florida Police, special cadaver dogs were flown to the Grand Bahama. No clues, no report, no suspect, no witnesses. More than 25 people were detained and released in those 5 months. All they wanted to do now was to recover any evidence of the missing. By October 2003, some 5 months after the first young man went missing, Jake Grant, a big movement was made in his case because investigators soon found that Jake's disappearance didn't fit the same pattern of the other 4 missing boys. He had been left to die alone in the bushes not far from a swimming pool where he had went to go and swim and play with his friends. Jake, they said, had gotten in trouble in the pool and the boys dragged him out of the water and left him in some nearby bushes. Out of fear that they would get in trouble, none of them talked. Although his body was found, no one understood or knew what happened to him for months because no one said anything. They thought they would get in trouble. But by October 11 in 2003, newspapers reported that 4 boys who had been swimming with Jake had been charged with manslaughter. So this separate case, although very, very tragic, was very different from the case of the missing boys. By October 5th of 2003, a firm stronghold of fear grasped the entire island. And in reality, no one even knew if it was a killer because those boys had just gone missing. There was no bodies found. Despite the vigilance of the community, despite the vigilance of the police force, despite an island-wide manhunt. Now, one thing that all 5 of these boys had in common, including Jake, was that they were part-time baggers at the local Winn-Dixie in Freeport. This was the biggest mystery to hit this nation. Nobody understood what was happening, and in very many recent years, nothing like this had ever happened to this community. The authorities were confused, the people were confused, and they were fearful because now they had something happening in the community that they could not explain, they could not understand. No bodies were found because of the push from the authorities and the local government to not want to stop people from coming to these islands for tourism. Because remember now, this is a beautiful, beautiful island. The hot weather, the beautiful scenery, part of the major economic income is tourism. So with this happening now and this news spreading, they didn't want the people from outside and abroad to not come to their island. So the authorities were so interested in making sure that people thought or had the idea that everything is okay. Please don't stop coming. Our islands are safe while all of this was going on. Because of these fears and growing anxiety, Britain's Scotland Yard and America's FBI was called in to consult. All over the world, the news of this was going and getting bigger and bigger that there was a serial killer on the island of Grand Bahama. They wanted to stop this shockwave that was happening across the globe, so they brought those entities in to assure people and travelers and tourists that it was still safe to come to the Bahamas. But the reality was no one knew what was happening. There was no crime scene, there was no bodies, there was no witnesses, there was no suspect. Even though many people, over 25 people, had been called in for questioning and then released. They were not the people that had taken these missing boys. By October 12th of 2003, the authorities had to admit they had no clue. They had no idea what was going on Grand Bahama. There had been dozens and dozens of false leads, false arrests, but with fear mounting in the community and tensions, the police were trying to just quell any panic that can arise from the situation. At first, when the boys started to go missing, they thought they were dealing with runaway cases. But 5 months, 3 other missing boys, even they had to admit to themselves that they didn't have a clue and they needed help. With all the people that they brought in, all the things that they tried to do, nothing even gave them a push, even gave them an inch in this case. Until Sunday, October 26th of 2003. On that day, a man who reports have said surrendered himself to the police. And this man who surrendered himself led these detectives to a very grim end to all of this mystery. It was in the Barber Beach area of Grand Bahama where remains, mostly skeletal, were found. Cordell Farrington, a 35-year-old man, a warehouse worker, a father, a boyfriend, surrendered himself to the police and was charged on Wednesday, October 29th with the murders of the 4 young boys and also a 5th person that authorities didn't even notice was missing. 22-year-old Jamal Robbins, a man whom Cordell Farrington had met at a drug rehabilitation center. Like most serial killers throughout human history, everyone that knew Farrington said that he led an outwardly normal life. He was even very likable. He had a job, he had a new child, a daughter, and reports say 2 or 3 children in total, and he was an artist. A manager at the store at the warehouse where Farrington worked said that he worked there for 3 months. He passed all the background checks. He was always cheerful. He was a happy man. He didn't make any fuss. It was never a miserable person. And we know many people who can be like that. So Cordell outwardly showed nothing to indicate. He had no indication. Nobody had any indication that this was the man that was responsible for these missing boys. Who was Cordell Farrington now? He was a 35-year-old man at the time of his surrender. He was born in 1968, and according to his own claims, he was abused as a child. At some point in his life, he became addicted to crack cocaine and managed to become rehabilitated over time. Once he became rehabilitated, he then moved on to work at different jobs, including training as a priest. And then, after all of those experiences, he settled into the warehouse work, which is where we find him in 2003. In his spare time, he would draw pictures. Now, these pictures were weird because he would draw pictures of boys crying. Some of these pictures were even exhibition at the showcase at the Artists Association of Grand Bahama. When he surrendered himself, he had a girlfriend which he had a 3-month-old daughter with. This girlfriend said that he was very protective of his art room where he said that, oh, no one should go into this room. This is the art room where he would craft items out of driftwood and conch shells, and he kept some cardboard boxes in this room. He used to tell her, this is my room. Nobody's supposed to go in this room. Now, he stored some belongings at her mother's home, including 3 sealed boxes that he left on the porch. In those boxes were bones sealed in separate bags and labeled with a number according to police. She said they started to live together early in 2003 before the boys began to go missing. And she said he mentioned that he had been abused as a child, but that he had been himself to her and to his children a good father. She said he started to lose weight, and because of this, she began to suspect that he was back using cocaine again. At this point, she decided to break up with him. And October 26th, the day she broke up with him, is the day a few hours later when he turned himself into the police. She was said to have said, I was living with a serial killer and didn't know. She said he was so nice. We're going to take a trip back to July of 2002. In July of 2002, Jamal Robbins disappeared, the 22-year-old friend of Cordell Farrington. Jamal Robbins was a young man that Farrington had a homosexual relationship with, and this was happening without knowledge of any girlfriend. A former lover of the murderer, Ontario Floyd, he testified against Cordell Farrington in reference to the murder of Jamal Robbins. Robbins went missing in July of 2002. Floyd, who was a pool attendant at the Leaford Key, explained in 2002, he lived at Mallory Lane. He was employed at the Burger King as a cleaner, making about $165 a week. He said he met Cordell Farrington in January of 2002, and he moved in within a week of them meeting. He was 21 at the time, and he was living in an apartment with himself, Cordell, of course, once he moved in, and 2 other roommates. So Farrington, when he moved in Ontario, they were lovers. They slept in the same bedroom. But in May of 2002, the 2 roommates moved out, and Cordell also moved out of the bedroom with his lover. But by February 2002, Ontario said he started to see Jamal coming around the apartment. On July 17, 2002, Ontario said that he left work at 12 noon, and by the time he came home, it was about 12:30. He said he overheard argument and fussing and fighting between Cordell and Jamal. And what he was telling Jamal was that if he continued to sell his body, that he would get AIDS. And at that point, Cordell said to Ontario in a joking way, "I will kill that boy." He said, now the conversation didn't last long. He did not intervene in the argument. He just went to bed. He said he was awakened by a rumbling around 6:30 a.m. the next morning. Within 5 minutes, he said Cordell was at his door shouting, "Terry, Terry, Terry, I kill him." Of course, Ontario, very unhappy about the fact that he was just woken up and what this man was saying. Of course, he didn't believe him, but nonetheless, he was being woken up at this ungodly hour. Sound like he's just talking nonsense, but nonetheless, he followed him to the bedroom where he said he saw a body lying face up on the floor, and it was the body of Jamal Robbins. He said when he looked and he saw the body, Cordell Farrington was standing over the body, and he was wrapping up the body and cleaning up the blood. He said he was very angry and asked Cordell, "What are you doing in this house? What are you doing in their home? What have you done? What have you done?" Ontario started pacing. He started pacing the hallway, and he was thinking, he was just wondering in his mind, who can he call? Who can he tell? Who can he get to help? He felt because he was gay, he definitely couldn't tell his mother, and he definitely didn't feel to call the police. Now, in 2002, even being the idea of being gay in the islands, it wasn't accepted. So just the idea of him knowing he's gay, it stopped him from being able to reach out to his mother or the police in this situation. He said Farrington came up to him and shook him and said, "Catch yourself, catch yourself." And he told him that he would harm him and his family if he don't help him. Farrington went back into the bedroom, finished wrapping up the body and cleaning up the blood with soap, with towels and sheets. Ontario said he was forced to help him to move the body. He said he couldn't lift him by himself, so he was forced to help him to carry the body into the trunk of Farrington's car, and then they drove the body and discarded him in the bushes off of the Grand Bahama Highway. During this time now, when witness is giving his statement, Farrington nor Ontario would give each other eye contact. Farrington was just sat in the courtroom with his head down and his eyes down. The anxiety and I'm sure emotion of expressing this and out loud, Ontario broke down in the court and had to be escorted out of the court. The jurors had to endure hours of watching his confession tape when he confessed to the police. Now, again, Farrington was first charged with the murder of Jamal and later on charged with the murder of the 4 young boys. So for the trial of Jamal, it was a trial for Jamal's murder only at this time. He said at an unsworn testimony that the day of his expression of how he murdered Jamal, that this was an event that haunted him in prison for the last 3 years. He was tried for Jamal's murder in 2006. He said he also wishes that things had ended differently between them. He said that if he had just a little bit more control over Jamal, then it didn't have to end like this, and he would be alive today. He said he feels like Jamal is still with him and he loved him so much, and that he even feels like he know him better than his own family. Also told the court that he suffers from periodic memory lapse due to his own abusive childhood. You know, the jurors had to sit through Farrington very calmly and collectively explaining and giving the police details of how he brutally murdered Jamal Robbins. He was sitting very emotionless as the details of the night was revisited and reviewed by the jury. On the videotape, he recounted how how he first met Robbins at the rehabilitation center, how they became lovers back in 2000, and he described their relationship as a business relationship that was strictly for sex. He went on to describe how they carried on with the relationship after being released from Sandylands Rehabilitation Center, which is the rehabilitation center in which they met. According to Farrington, shortly after they met and they left the rehabilitation center, continuing their relationship, things changed, and he said that Robbins began using drugs again and resorted to stealing and doing many things to support his habit. And Robbins Jamal threatened to leave Farrington because he said that he could no longer afford him. And this is what angered Farrington to the point of taking this young man's life. He told the officers that one night while Robbins was lying across the bed they shared, he hit him across the head with an iron as hard as he could. After hitting him in the head, he followed with blows to the body. He then described how he wrapped up the body in a blanket. With the help of Ontario, he was able to dispose of the body in a bushy area off of the Grand Bahama Highway. He told the police he even returned to the scene in December 2002 to ensure that the body was decaying so that he would be able to package the remains and take them home with him for safekeeping. He knew how important it was that if those bones was found, that he would be found out. He also said that he did this because he wanted Jamal to always be near him. The police asked Farrington if he had thoughts of killing again, and he said yes. He said it was only a matter of how and when. Now, despite the reports that this man was a drug addict and also a psychiatric patient, all reports and outward indications was that he was living a very normal life. It said that he had just moved to the Grand Bahama a year and a half before the murder spree started. So he went to court in 2006 and was charged for the murder of Jamal. And now in 2010 is when he went to court for the missing young boy. And here are some of the details of what he explained happened with each of those boys. And if this is too much, I will put a timestamp on the video. If you don't want to hear about what he did to the young boys, then please skip to this time and then we can go on with the videos. The 11-year-old Mackinson Colas, it was said that this was the young boy that went missing on May 16th of 2003. He was last seen by his mom. Farrington told the police that he picked the boy up on Pioneer's Way in Freeport. He confessed that he took him home, ordered him to take a shower, and then told him that he was going to kill him. According to his statement, Farrington said that when the boy asked him why he had to kill him, he told him he just had to do it. He said he bound the boy by his hands and feet with duct tape and struck him on the head several times with a wooden plank. He then put the boy's body in the trunk of his car, drove to Barbary Beach, and buried him there. 2 weeks later, he returned to collect his remains. D'Angelo Mackenzie, 13-year-old boy, he was last seen by his grandfather on May 27, 2003. Farrington told the police that he picked the boy up from the parking lot of the Church of God while he was heading home from school. He said he asked the boy to come home with him to pick up some equipment for the church. He confessed that he took the boy home and had sex with him twice, and then he asked the boy about his family and told him he was going to have to kill him. He said the boy told him he just wanted to go to school and have a good education. Farrington said he then bound the boy with duct tape. He hit him in the head several times with a wooden plank. He then put the boy's body in the trunk of his car and drove to Barbary Beach where he hid the body. Junior Remy, the 11-year-old boy. Junior Remy was reported missing on July 29, 2003 and was last seen by his mother. So Farrington told police that he said he had picked the boy up at the rear of the Christ the King Anglican Church and took him home. He said there he ordered the boy to take a shower and the boy refused. Farrington told the investigators that he bound the boy with duct tape and the child started to scream. So he stabbed him in the neck with a knife. All the while he's doing this to this young man, his own son was in another room. Told the police that he took the boy's body and put it in the trunk of his car. He then drove to Barbary Beach where he hid the body, and he said for this young boy, he was sorry the boy had to die such a horrible death. Desmond Roll, the 14-year-old boy. He said Desmond was last seen by his mother. This was the young man that was missing as of September 28, 2003. Farrington said he picked up the boy at a park while he was heading to Williamstown. He told the boy he knew his mother and his brother, and having gained his trust, he drove him to a bushy area where he handcuffed him and him. Farrington said he then slit the boy's throat, took his body back to his car, and committed a act. He took the boy's body to Barbary Beach, opened the chest cavity, removed the heart, and severed his limb. And Farrington told the police that he was trying a new way to kill. The families of these victims had to sit in the court to hear how horrible this man was and what he did to their children. As anyone could guess, the revelations during Farrington's sentences sparked a whole emotional outburst from all of the members of the victims' families. They were sobbing uncontrollably, and of course they had to be ushered out of the court because of these grim and gross and disgusting details. The prosecutor even said that there was evidence that Farrington had also been involved in bestiality and had admitted to Sandilands that he suffered physical, emotional, and psychological abuse. He said that the prosecution had accepted Farrington's plea of guilt to the charge of manslaughter as he had acted with diminished responsibility. They admit that they are wrong and what they did was wrong, but they feel that the responsibility for that is diminished because they are not of sound mind. When asked if he had anything to say, they said that Farrington broke out in tears and said that he didn't fully understand what happened but asked for forgiveness from the family members. His attorney even noted that he had confessed to the crimes and suffered from a severe personality disorder. She submitted that prior to committing the offenses, he had been a productive and law-abiding citizen. That in sentencing, they were hoping that the judge would give some sort of lenience. In the sentencing, the judge said that the promising lives of 4 young men had been snuffed out and that the court could show no further mercy or degree of forgiveness to Farrington for what he had done to them, what he had taken from them. He also noted that yes, Farrington reportedly suffers from a severe personality disorder. Yes, we know something is wrong. The killings that he did were so horrific. They were of the caliber of someone who should never be readmitted into society, to live amongst normal people, to live among people, boys, children, mothers, fathers, that he should not be given that opportunity. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for each of the 4 counts of murder, and the judge stated that while he was in prison, he was to receive the counseling he needs, and the court hoped that he would spend the rest of his natural life in jail. Now, originally, when Farrington was sentenced, he was sentenced to death, but on October 5th, 2008, the death sentence was commuted to life in prison, and on September 30th, 2010, he was sentenced officially to life in prison. In 2014, Farrington appeared before the court again with the request of his sentence being quashed in connection to Robin's killings, and based on his reasoning that there was a case of Dominique Moss, a man who was initially convicted of killing a woman on a drunk drive-in incident, and later he was released from prison. Of course, when the court looked at this, they said very different circumstances, very different occasions. My friend, you and this man are not the same. Drunk driving, yes, he was wrong, and yes, it caused the murder of a woman, but it's not the same as what you did. On March 31st, 2015, the court quashed the sentence and replaced it with another judgment of life imprisonment.
What do you feel caused you to go down that pathway of committing those offenses?
In exploring it, because I wanted to know also. Remember, my guess was just as good as anybody's guess. My confusion was like anybody, and I was in the same dilemma, interestingly, as everybody else was. But as I began to search and try to understand why I committed the crimes I committed, it may have evidently stemmed off from my childhood upbringing.
What kind of childhood upbringing you had?
It was abusive, it was sexually abusive, emotionally and physically. I was unstable in my geographical movements because I was moving from here to there and everywhere. And this one hands, that one hands, and all of these different things. It's a conglomerate of things that contributed toward me making bad choices.
That is the case of the Bahamian serial killer, Cordell Farrington. I've never seen this case reported on YouTube, and I wanted to share this with you. There's no blaming any of the victims. The victims were very young and they were very impressionable, but it's so easy out here for people to take advantage and manipulate people. So we want to be mindful of making sure that our children are aware. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video, and we'll sage our space.